On patreon.com/consensusunreality you will find bonus episodes, written content, and much more. This recording contains an exclusive follow-up and bonus episode only on Patreon. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show.
So, welcome to another episode of Consensus on Reality, your favorite podcast this year and from now on. We've been talking a lot about like AI lately and really running pretty fast and loose with the with the extrapolations of where that might go and what that is. Me on the sort of dystopian apocalyptic end, and Dave more on the like let's just see what happens.
Cyber curious, yeah.
Right, yeah. Cyberpunk Dave and cyber goth Ben. But I think so today we're joined by someone who knows something about it. And that'll be good. So it's Alex Kiefer, who works in the field of artificial intelligence. He has a PhD in philosophy and is sort of entered the realm of artificial intelligence from that slightly atypical route. So it'll be interesting to see today what he can shine a light on in terms of the AI apocalypse. Just kidding. Unless, I don't know. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Awesome.
Yeah. Thanks so much for coming on. I think we've been talking a lot about this stuff with all the metaverse talk and obviously kind of the movements towards living more online, and it's obviously a time when our tech precedes our understanding of the tech, and I think that just rapidly is accelerating and has been accelerating for, a couple decades probably. But so I think it's awesome to have somebody who's, studied in philosophy and also is now working in artificial intelligence to maybe either clear up some of the goofery that is going on out there in terms of conspiracy stuff, or maybe just radicalize us further. Who knows?
I can confirm that all of that is true a priori before we even get into it.
Cool. What is your sort of what are you working on in that realm specifically?
It's weird. So one cool thing about AI, about deep learning especially, is that it's naturally kind of domain general. So my company has decided to just tackle everything at once. So I've been working a little bit on robotics control that integrates social interaction with trying to figure out where you are and stuff if you're a robot. And also just generative AI art, which is all, you see that stuff all over. So we're doing a version of that. And some other stuff like natural language processing, which I'm sure will be fun to talk about. So I guess those are the main things.
I've been seeing a lot of those, the generative AI bots on Twitter just sort of popped up recently, and there's tons of accounts with that stuff now, right?
Yeah.
Creating
that's one of the things that got me into this is I really believe that these people came up with a pretty viable model of the imagination.
Interesting. Wow.
What model or how is it? Because I feel that's something that's almost associated with magic or something. How can you model such a thing?
Right. Well, I guess So I think So I mean, it's a model, right? It is just a model. I'm not saying it's as good as the real article, but I think it's basically, the thing that's interesting that I don't know if this is where you wanted to go with this, by the way. I'll just run with it for a minute. But like,
yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, like it's just like kind of the algorithm that I was impressed by was called the Helmholtz machine, which is a neural network that so the big idea was, so it's really hard to do, well, at least when this paper was written in like 1995, it was really hard to do computer vision, like, you know, to get from a bunch of pixels to a label was like a really hard problem. Like they'd solved all these rule-based things like chess and, you know, and various games and proving theorems and logic and stuff. But this is something more like, how do you get to a concept from visual data or something? And so this paper, this group proposed the idea that, well, if you had a model of how to generate images from like thoughts, then you could just flip it around and you'd have a computer vision model. And so they were like, well, what if we start with a really bad computer graphics model that goes from like a compressed code to an image, and generate images using that, and then train the vision model at the same time. So you have two really bad models and you bootstrap and train both of them at the same time. And the cool thing is that the way that if you read this as a philosophical account of imagination, it's like the way that it works is essentially just the same constraints that you'd use when you translate visual data into concepts, just sort of run in reverse. And then you add a bunch of noise for the randomness, which is the magic part. Because who knows if there really is randomness, then that's as close to magic as you need. So
yeah, that's interesting. And so that's sort of where these I don't know what the newest one is called, but these like Neuralink, not Neuralink, that's the there was like, Neural Blender was a big one like a few months ago.
I don't even know that one. I can't keep up with.
That's like the principle that those work on,
I guess. I mean, if it's a generative AI art thing, then it's probably pretty much that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. Like I saw someone they typed Lou Reed into it, and it came up with this sort of like monstrous looking like thing, like kind of like a Frankenstein's monster Lou Reed. It's getting in, like info from the internet or something, right? Like
well, so probably, man, I don't know that particular model, but probably it was trained on 1 billion images of things, including Lou Reed.
Right.
And also, so that kind of thing would also have a language model component, which is like read all of Wikipedia. Read, I mean, I say that in scare quotes, you know, so like it knows, quote unquote, or maybe not quote unquote, I don't know, we can get into it, but like it knows like the kinds of sentences that Lou Reed, the word, appears in. And so anything statistically related to that might also be used to condition this image generation model, which then like, it's like, I remember seeing some of the earliest examples of of like neural net generated art. And it looked like, it was like horrible, but amazing. It was like it looked like it was some slugs made out of dog parts, basically.
Right.
So
I remember that.
Yeah. I saw that it was like posted on Reddit, and I was like, oh my God, what?
Yeah.
But so it's basically like, I think these algorithms have a good handle on the statistics of like fine-grained visual details, but then they don't always, it's harder to get the grouping of the elements that define those lower order details to be related in a sensible way. So like, Lou Reed, but with weird perturbations sounds about right.
Right. Yeah. That's so interesting. I guess that's kind of like, like what it's being used for in the pop culture right now, which is like, you know,
it's like a massive like data chimera, you know, or something like that. I don't know that all of the image have that sort of slug quality too, where there's sort of a morphing or something going on. But that's interesting. Does the stuff you're working on sort of have that same kind of like gooey aesthetic, you know, or? I
mean, it ends up having it, which I think is a little bit, you know, we try to get away from that. I think it was cool and new originally, meaning like what, 10 years ago or whatever. And now I think it's become the thing that's like, it seems to be an artifact of the tool at this point. And like, if you want to do something creative, you might want to get away from that, but it's hard to get away from that.
Yeah.
Cause
right. It's almost like paint, like having a certain texture to it or something that you can't really, it's like part of the medium, I guess. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, so what do you think of, I guess it's not quite AI, but to change the subject slightly, what do you think of the sort of, well, the whole Facebook metaverse thing and that sort of like, the move from like the move online, I guess. It's almost like this.
Yeah, man, I really would love to hear what you guys think about it. But what I think is, I don't know. I don't know if it's kind of the same way I feel about progress in general, like since, the Industrial Revolution and whatever before that. Yeah. I don't know if we're on the right train or not. And it's huge. It matters like as much as it matters infinitely. And I don't know if it's where we should be going or not. Yeah. Mostly I'm skeptical though.
Right.
Are you skeptical of the infrastructure for it or if it's the right thing to, like, even the right thing for humanity?
Yeah, I mean, I'm mostly skeptical of the particular in way it's been instantiated by this particular company at this particular time in the context it's in. Yeah. Really, it's sort of extrinsic. Like the idea of us sort of moving into a meta realm where everything's virtual. Actually, I mean, so I know Snow Crash comes up in this context a lot, but when I read that, I was like, wow, because I had that idea since I was like 6. I was thinking about that, right? About this, you touch a tree and you sort of activate all of these data points that are overlaid on the tree that provide you more information. You can zoom in and stuff. So I always thought that was a fascinating idea. And that's why I got into this field partly. But when I see this being, maybe it's a leap to equate that with what Facebook's doing. But when I see this being realized in this way where, to me, the motives are murky and not being made clear to people. And, there's all sorts of just bad humanity around it. And that's what bothers me.
Yeah. Snow Crash is excellent. It's the early kind of, well, I guess that's not that early, but the cyberpunk stuff is just so visceral that I could see how that would inspire somebody to get involved in that field. It's so visual too, obviously, but yeah, it just seems like it's kind of it's all being put into vogue very fast because of COVID related stuff. It seems opportunistic, obviously. I don't know if that's what you're hinting at, but it seems like there's a lot of issues too, just in terms of like rendering and stuff and this sort of like cartoony quality to it all. It seems like maybe a workaround to actually rendering the visualization of a world, instead making it like cartoon avatar based. But there's some sort of weird psychology to that too, of some Neverland quality,
right? Yeah, the Disney features. Factor. Yeah, it feels very like I don't know. Well, for one thing, the whole cartoon thing, I feel like destroys like physiological difference that people like have from person to person, and it turns everyone into sort of like a, I don't know what you call it, but yeah, the sort of cartoon aspect is, I can't quite, except for that, I can't quite put my finger on why that bothers me so much. Because I mean, it's not like I don't like cartoons. It's like, I guess it's like the mix of like the like government kind of feel to the whole thing. Like it feels like it could pretty quickly like become like a mandatory thing or something, or like not mandatory, but like, yeah.
No, I could see how you could think that. I mean, de facto, having a cell phone is almost mandatory now. And
right.
I always hear the comparison of this to cell phones. It's like cell phones are addictive. We'll wait till you see this thing. Mm-hmm. So I can see the worry. And yeah, the mix of cartoony and governmental is definitely not easy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting the way that the blockchain plays into it too, and sort of the the quality of the blockchain that your transactions are sort of public and inescapable, you know? So like the idea of having one wallet that you're tethered to that
I don't like that.
Can just be out there is like it's just relative to like some revelations based conspiracy nonsense, you know, that's been put out there forever.
Yeah. I forget the details of the revelation stuff, but I definitely, I don't like this idea of, I mean, it's actually, there's an interesting tension here because the blockchain stuff is partly all about distributed, ness and lack of trying to avoid centralization. I think you guys talked about this once. This is a good podcast. I listened to some episodes of it, but so like distributed stuff and transparency, or like you said, that it's on a public record forever, that can be good in some ways. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's a tension between that and like, this is the tool that's going to be the ultimate surveillance type tool,
right?
Sister.
Yeah, that's why it's such an interesting time right now. Is 'cause I think people are simply just trying to understand what the hell it is. But if you look into it a little bit, the whole Web3 thing could be seen as a sort of like liberating technology, and the idea of like a P2P type internet. I think people see a lot of positive in that, obviously, and accountability maybe through the blockchain. But then if you want to sort of tunnel into some conspiratorial thinking, then you have like ideas of like an overpowering, omnipresent government that you can't escape unless you're a part of this like transactional based ledger,
Yeah.
I don't understand. I guess, my issue with it always has been like, I don't understand how it's not obvious that it's going to be like a totalitarian move. Like, how could that ever be, like, except for like maybe for like 5 minutes at the very beginning? It seems like it's just so well built for total surveillance of everyone. Like, it's built for that almost. Like, almost like it's like that was the like original idea, and they kind of shifted it to like the counterculture for a minute to see like if it could get into the culture better that way. I mean,
Well, I tend to think in similar ways. I think, Ben, to you on this. So like, I definitely see that. I guess I have a bit of a different angle because, well, I don't know people who developed like blockchain or anything directly, but I think that there's a certain like genuine, like left field, we're going to do things differently kind of type of thinking people who build this kind of thing. At least that's the case, I think, for neural nets. Like there's another thing that can be, you can just see it as like, it's just the machinery behind face recognition. And it's been oppressive from the start. But I think that people who developed it, like had a genuine passion for it at least. And like, were being creative and really just cared about the thing they were building for its own sake, which of course could be terrible, right? Because that's the same as the people who worked on the Manhattan Project.
Right. Yeah.
It's not an exoneration by any means, but like, I don't know. Blockchain seems to me like it has, I can't explain, right, why I would think that it has the potential for something better exactly. But to me, the thing that's definitely a problem is that what you mentioned, like you have to be part of it. That's the thing that worries me. If you could just opt out, then okay, fine.
Right. Yeah. No, it's interesting because I think arguably you'd have to think that the people who developed the blockchain already thought that the government was sort of a totalitarian entity to a degree. So they were trying to maybe like create an infrastructure that couldn't be infiltrated by governments in that way. I lost my thought a little bit there, but
it reminds me of like Tor, which like I guess people developed for similar and like other like private internet browsing stuff. But I feel like, at least in my like cursory research on it, it always seems to lead back to like some sort of military like development type thing.
Right.
Like it's almost like like playground for people where like, it's like there's no rules here except like,
Yeah, I
that's
don't.
just
My idea is like it always kind
yeah.
of filters back to that it might have been developed by like DARPA in the first place. You know, like the whole
Yeah.
Satoshi thing is kind of interesting with Bitcoin and Tor. It kind of seems like that might have just been like developed in defense. You know, and even if it's not, it seems like these things always kind of get swallowed up into that regardless. So I don't know where that gray area is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty predictable that will happen. And I mean, even some of my favorite like machine learning researchers definitely took DARPA money like pretty early on in their career, and they probably didn't think anything of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what their politics are or whatever. So I can't really say what that means to them, but yeah, if you're looking at it pragmatically, it's hard for this stuff not to go wrong in many ways. But yeah, okay, just to come back to the thing earlier, like I guess I'm not convinced. I mean, it's partly just the momentum and that like, I used to dream about this when I was a kid, and it's hard to like give up the dream if I want to work on it. But like if I'm convinced that it's evil for humanity, I guess I'll stop. But like but I also don't think that we just want to try to go backward.
For sure.
That doesn't seem like what would the point have been?
Right.
So
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we do a little backtrack and then there's some other, like, where do we go back to though? Like, is the information age the problem? Is it earlier than that?
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Are we still in the information age? Are we leaving that? Or like, what would be after that?
I think we got to still be in it. Maybe there's some other age embedded in it.
Yeah. I'm not quite like a Luddite about any of it, and I don't think it's all bad. Obviously, we're fully integrated. We're basically like cyborgs at this point anyway. Just the way that the internet is involved in our lives. But yeah, it's interesting thinking about the way that information is used and data is used, and I think like the way that pattern recognition always wants to like push out some sort of connectivity between things, and people want to see like a grand sort of conspiracy behind why things are the way they are, and things just aren't like going in many different directions all the time,
I don't know. I don't know about that. I mean,
it's weaponized too. I mean, people understand this.
Yeah.
This is like how money gets hidden with like actual conspiracies. They kind of will hide a level under some sort of ridiculous conspiracy, to create a layer of absurdity, to cloak it, or even something like QAnon, where you could create a conspiracy to sway an election or whatever, or galvanize a public opinion. It's being like conspiracies weaponized at this point.
I think it probably always has been. I mean,
right, true.
I don't know.
Well, but I do think that's true on a different scale now. I mean, just because it's like like awareness of conspiracy type theorizing or thinking or culture or whatever is like mainstream at this point, which I think is like is new.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
It reminds me of like, I mean, I guess conspiracy thing. It was always kind of like a subculture as opposed to like, or like in addition to being, a mode of thinking or something. And it's not even like, it's also like kind of an artificial subculture. And I guess probably a lot of them were, but like, since, it was sort of created as a way to discredit like people who questioned the JFK assassination. It was like a way to box people into a certain place. But it is interesting that it's kind of like coming out now as like a major political force or something, like I don't know, like to back a major political candidate at it, it's like, anyway, maybe we're getting in the weeds a little bit.
Oh yeah, it's gonna go all over in the weeds. We'll probably just, like in 10 minutes we'll be like, so what is quantum computing?
Oh yeah, I don't know.
Shit, I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't.
Anyway,
no. If you ask like if you polled like Americans, I'm sure the majority at this point would say that UFOs are real, and that's like a kind of like a compound question anyway. But now that sort of narrative is being used to probably push defense agendas right now, where it's in the news and stuff, and it's like, well, we need to defend our skies against the hypothetical threat, which is probably just like China and Russia, but
yeah,
right.
But it's a barometer of where I'm at anyway. I just assume that's what that narrative is that I assume that or I try not to assume, but it seems like that's a conspiracy in itself, right? It's a conspiracy thought in itself, but it seems obviously true that this is probably being used to push an agenda, right?
Yeah, right.
So it's like a meta conspiracy.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to. What? This is your podcast. Don't let me turn it around on you. But what do you think? What do you think the I forget what the fuck I was saying.
About you? About
Oh no. Okay, yeah. So, what? Like, do you think that we can? Is there any constructive or can human beings like have access to the internet, or something like the internet, and can it work? I mean, because to me, it's just like you have everything plugged into your head. I just don't think it works. I think that's why we're in this netherworld of like, who knows what's true? Because
yes,
yeah. No,
I totally agree with you. Yeah. That's usually,
it does seem like too much, yeah.
And I think it's like accelerating some pathologies, like it's or creating them. But I don't know. I feel like people's and there's like a whole relationship in the sort of occult field of synchromysticism now, and noticing synchronicities, and it's something we talk about a lot. And I think we kind of like to almost document it and archive it. But it's interesting the line of where people's pattern recognition is in some sort of feedback loop with what they consume through the internet, and also like the involvement of algorithmic technology. Yeah. That
like you wonder. I mean, it seems like it would be all too easy to drive any one individual completely insane through the use of the algorithm.
Oh yeah.
Like so easy that you can't imagine that they're not doing it targetedly for paranoid, but it just seems like common sense, like for any like undesirable, like.
Yeah. I hadn't even thought that much about that, but it makes sense. It's certainly something that the technology could probably do, and like, it would be a real useful tool. So yeah, I'm sure there's some of that going on. That's certainly going on 100%, as much as I'm sure of anything. I mean, the universe could have come into existence 2 seconds ago, whatever, but 99% sure that that's being done more at like a blanket level, message crafting and all that, of course.
Sure. Yeah. And like for, obviously with advertising and stuff, like people are all on Reddit, like, I just thought of, I was thinking of Levi's, and then a Levi's ad came up, and it's like, well, yeah, like, I mean, you probably had said Levi's earlier or something, and your microphone's on, and now it's showing you the ad, and we all sort of accept these insidious truths every day. So I think like living with that sort of reality drives people to even, crazier thoughts that may or may not be real.
Yeah, I do feel like we're in like an age of like, I don't know if it's like corporate people or like some sort of, I don't know like who's doing what. Like I'm not like claiming any like shadowy elite type thing, but I feel like we're in an age of like things are being like pushed on people in a massive way that is like, they're trying to see how much people are willing to pay, like in terms of in order to keep the luxuries that were introduced like 10-ish years ago, or like 20 years ago, like super fast internet, like smart. They're trying to like see how much you're willing to like give up in terms, and I don't want to like bring any kind of COVID thing into it necessarily, but I feel like it's a similar model to that, where in like, at least editorial angle, like, and I mean, no matter where you fall on the COVID thing, it's like obvious that like the structure of this event mimics this, like this, what I'm saying of like, how much is the public willing to take of a certain like kind of restriction. But I guess what I'm talking about more is like the incursion of into your privacy by what appears to be advertisers. Yeah.
Right. No, okay. It's totally clear to me in the COVID case that that's one element of one dimension or aspect of what's going on is some kind of testing of pushing the envelope in certain ways. But then I was wondering what's the analog for that just in terms of like using digital tech and stuff. And it's funny. Yeah. We just take it for granted now that Facebook is listening. Ha ha ha.
Right.
And it's like, and you just keep buying stuff and doing stuff. So,
right.
Yeah.
I mean, I do always think about solutions and like how to sort of change this stuff. I mean, maybe some of it can be lived with, but like, I don't know. I don't know how to really, as an individual, try to change this stuff. It's tough.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us could do anything about it, but I think noticing it is good, because it's kind of tricky because it's so slow, or it comes in like bursts. Like the changes to certain things, and like the way that it creeps into like the culture is like often by like first like dismissing it as paranoid, and then reintegrating it as like a true thing, and then like it's like this like little dance.
Do you think people will get used to that cycle at some point? Like, so that
I think they are. Yeah.
Oh, but like once we're used to it, I would think that maybe that particular strategy would have to change or something. Although maybe not. If people just don't mind that much, then
I guess why fix it if it ain't broken?
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, I mean it's so dark, but I feel like the internet is like, it's just so crazy. It's like unrecognizable from like pre-Trump or like what. But it feels like within the last 8-ish years or so is when I'm like kind of like, there's 3 websites, and you know that the whole like cliche of that, but like I don't know.
Do you think like there's hope for the landscape and the architecture of the internet itself, like kind of what Ben's talking about, maybe in the aughts to like 2010, maybe it seemed like there was the blogs and a more website-based architecture of the internet. It seemed like there was more of a free exchange of information and even maybe like digital commodities like music and stuff like that. But now that we're kind of transporting everything through these 3 social media websites or so, it feels like everything's hammered down a lot more. Do you think there's kind of like do you foresee any sort of like change happening with that, or?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing, I think it exists still. I think that's sort of open, like GeoCities type pages and stuff like that it's still there. It's just that these platforms that have this, network effect, as they say, have gotten so dominant in people's consciousness when they log on that other stuff is just less noticeable. And also when it comes to copyrighted material and stuff like that, there has been a sort of erosion of the freedom to trade MP3s and stuff. But I can see it. I don't know. It's hard to predict, but it's hard to predict because I just don't know. Like I can see people getting bored with how I could see it becoming more stagnant if these trends continue,
right?
Become more and more boring to be there. And then people have already shifted to some non-mainstream platforms. Some of them have to do with like politics, and there's certain platforms that are considered right wing or whatever. But a lot of it is just like people are tired of things being so locked down. So I think there's a whole bunch of alternative platforms that have grown up, but I don't know if I can see people like abandoning YouTube, for example, so that in a real way, like there's like mass spillover to other platforms, which is too bad, because like I was really upset that they removed the dislike button, for example, and like I really want people to branch out. But like I'm just thinking about like television, like people didn't, that was like the means of mass control before the internet, of course, and but I mean there was no obvious way to like change that, or like I just don't know if the internet has something built into it that's different than that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's funny you say that those websites are still out there, because it's like in my head I'm like, oh yeah, I mean that's totally true. They're right there. It's just like you get sucked into these portals that have dominated the whole forum of the internet itself, and then they kind of come with their own built-in like amnesia, where if say I was like looking at like a music review Instagram account, I don't think I could like revisit that page and like have some sort of memory attached to it. But when you had like a separate blog or something, then it's kind of like in its own real estate on the internet. I don't know, maybe that's a personal thing, but yeah, it's interesting to imagine how it could possibly change from here. And maybe is it like a visiting a record shop in the metaverse, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Half kidding.
I don't know. It's weird. Whatever it is, I'm well into it though. Like we have like my company has like a virtual office. It's like a video game basically.
Yeah.
And it's like fun, I could see getting used to this, but I don't really like, I'm worried about the kids, who don't know anything else, and more so as time goes on. That's my concern.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
I mean,
but I think
like growing up on the internet or whatever, like the specific internet that I grew up with, like from 2003, 4 up until like I had matured into like a person, and the way that impacted my like understanding of the world, like with like just like everything was accessible 100%. There was no real walls between like a good internet and a bad internet, or like an officially sanctioned internet or not. And moving into like what kids today will have not that like I'm not saying what I experienced was good, because I think that you shouldn't see like accidentally like horrible gore videos when you're 10 years old. It's not good. But the other end of the spectrum, being so integrated into this thing where like you can't even really get out of it. Like I could always just like close the computer and then go somewhere else, and like that's it. Like today I feel like it's not so easy to get away from it. It's kind of like built into everything. So yeah, I see the concern for kids and like people who are like developing while spending time on this.
Yeah. I mean, no doubt that people's brains will adapt wonderfully to this stuff, and they'll just, repurpose their cortex to like optimally deal with it and like be awesome at it and everything. And it could be a nice life, I guess. But I'm just worried about what things will seem like unthinkable in the future. Like like not wearing a seatbelt would have been okay, like however many 100 years ago or whatever, and I'm not saying we should, that particular example, like we're in the wrong right. World, but just like, I mean, I can imagine, like, okay, this is paranoid, but I can imagine in like 20 years, like just going outside to like hang out with some people in a park and be like, well, you're crazy. Like bodies have germs and like, you don't need to do that. And
for sure. Yeah. I mean, that anecdote seems like it could be quicker than imagining other stuff. I kind of think about like the Fahrenheit stuff of like a movie gets updated, like scenes get taken out of a movie, but the movie only exists digitally. So owning like DVDs becomes illegal or something like that. But like I don't know, you could go in a lot of different directions. I wanted to ask you real quick if you it's just like another hot button topic, obviously, and maybe it's stupid, but have you like visited the simulation theory stuff at all? And what do you think about it? Do you think it's like absurd, or is it sort of like a reification of old myths or something?
No, I love to talk about that. I don't think it's absurd at all. It's just, I totally get the argument. It seems like the statistically, like it's likely we're in a simulation argument kind of that makes sense. And I've never tried to really articulate what bothers me about the argument, but there's something wrong with it, I think, which is like, okay, but like, what would the base reality be like? And I don't know, maybe it's a lack of imagination, but I can't imagine that. It just seems like an extravagant hypothesis to think that there's another thing that's just like this, like reality, that's, and we're sort of running on a digital system that's built in that other reality, just because it would undermine the reason to I mean, when you posit that more fundamental reality, you're basing it on this thing that you experience. So, I mean, that's not inconsistent or anything. It's just I lose sight a bit of the alternative to the simulation hypothesis when I start to think about it. But I guess you could say it's simulations all the way down or something.
Right.
Right. Yeah. I feel the same thing of where it doesn't really makes even, like logically you can sort of understand the argument, but I don't really think that it doesn't feel like it could possibly be. It feels very much like a thought experiment, and like it can't possibly be more than that. And I don't know. Yeah. I don't know why.
Well, so there's some particular pieces of evidence that I've heard about. So this is like not me speaking as like a scientist, not that I'm a scientist, but not even me speaking professionally. This is just, an anecdote I remember of like reading something about how, so one thing it's like been important in neuroscience and AI lately is this idea of predictive coding. So it's like the idea that your mind is constantly generating predictions about what it's going to, about what sensory stimulation events are going to occur, right? And so like projecting top down these predictions. And so it's like a signal compression strategy, because if you predict most of the signal, then you don't have to pass forward as much. And so I remember reading some article on Facebook like several years ago about how some physicists had claimed to discover traces of predictive coding somehow in some way in the way that the universe is put together or something, like that there, God knows what it was, right? Some pattern in some sort of data suggested that was happening. And I mean, it's interesting to think about that kind of thing. It's just, I guess I'm not sure whether like digital, predictive coding doesn't have to be digital, but whether the kinds of things, okay, here's the dilemma. It's like either the kinds of things that we can currently build, like computers, are capable of like being supporting consciousness or not. But if they're not, then they're just like life forms, basically. So I don't know. This always turns into this when I try to explain it. It's like it doesn't go very well. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not yet convinced. Like, to really get into this, I feel like to really get into this, I feel like I need to understand whether there is whether it's true, which I think quantum mechanics says, but whether it's true that there's like a smallest building block of the physical world. Because if there's anything special about consciousness and biology and stuff, I think it would have to be like Leibniz said, something like the difference between a machine and an organism is that an organism is a machine in all its parts. So it would have to be, the special thing is that potentially the physical world has like a sort of infinite quality, like infinite base. You can't reduce it to its smallest bits. But if we're living in a simulation, then there are literally bits or qubits or whatever at the bottom of it. And that could be true of, reality as well. And, but that would be one possible difference.
That's interesting. I never heard that aspect of it. Yeah. What are some of the other like justifications of the simulation theory? Because I think it to me it just seems like it's very similar to like the Gnostic myth of like of the architecture of like what word would you use to describe it? Like the demiurge's creation in
like
Gnosticism?
a false world or something. Like,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess that theme runs through a lot of religion, huh?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
But Gnosticism is like the clearest. But I mean, other like reasons for it, I think the main argument is mostly just supposed to be that if you assume that we can create simulations that are indistinguishable from, reality, then we would have done that, and there would be way more of those than there would be base realities. Right. So the chances are you're in one of them. I really think that's the key argument.
Yeah.
But can we though? Is there evidence that we actually can?
Well, I mean, the evidence I've always heard is like, well, just look how much better Halo is getting every year or whatever. And, and, you can, and yes, you can that brains, I don't believe actually that it's clear that brains produce conscious experience, but we know that by altering your brain, you can alter conscious experience. And by plugging things into it that are like digital, you can make experiences happen. Like you can have a false retina or whatever. So, why not, I guess, is sort of like if you extrapolate, it's not clear. That's why I went into all this stuff. I went into predictive coding and like qubits and stuff, because it's not clear to me how to pin down what it is that we couldn't do, at least in terms of creating the phenomenology artificially.
Are qubits, is that like an intentional pun with like the biblical unit of measure?
Oh, I have no idea. That's a good question.
I always just like, are they like, I always feel like I'm talking to like Solomon or something when they're mentioning qubits.
That's cool. That gives it a cool twist.
Yeah. What was I going to ask about that though? As far as like, I mean, is everyone pretty much convinced, like in the field of AI, that like it's possible to actually create consciousness, like in the way that like a person is conscious? I always feel like, how do we know that something else is conscious?
Yeah. Well, I can't say that people are generally convinced of that, but like there are a lot of people who think that it's possible. I used to be pretty convinced it was possible just because I kind of bought into this. I mean, I don't like to be an ist in philosophy, but I kind of bought into functionalism, which is just the idea that mental states are, when you use a word like belief or experience or perception, that you're referring to a state in terms of its implicit like role, the role that it plays with respect to other states. Like I think that's how this, they always call it folk psychology, but how just intuitive psychology must have arisen is by implicitly understanding how we behave with each other, and you build sort of a model of that. And so if that's the case, then, we can, like, there's some paper that establishes as a basic result that if you have a 2-layer neural network in the formal technical sense, just like it's really just an equation, right? But if you have that, then you can approximate any function. So if you think of things people do, and this is reductive, and I don't really think this way about people, but if you think of the things people do as functions, input-output relations, anything that you can express in those terms, we can simulate. So, I do think there's more to human beings than that. But again, that's why I think if there is, it must tie into this infinite.
Right. Yeah, because then I feel like after you can simulate anything, which I totally understand. I think it's probably possible, but like, is there anyone in there, I guess, is what is anything actually experiencing that?
Oh, right. So, okay. Right. Thanks for making that explicit. So like, yeah. So like even in philosophy, there were, like Ned Block, for example, famous philosopher, took this position like, yeah, but consciousness, isn't a matter of function. You can't reduce consciousness to function. And so like, I mean, I said I used to believe this because I believe functionalism, and it seemed to me that you can sort of operationalize consciousness as well. You can say like, well, if you're aware, basically as being aware of your own mental states, if you're aware of what you see and you're aware of what you think, you're conscious.
Yeah.
And then you can say, well, awareness is, here's what it takes to be aware. You can draw the wiring diagram, but I'm not really convinced. I mean, I'm not really convinced of that. Although I don't know, the more I read and experience and study, the more I think that it's likely that that consciousness is sort of like more or less it's like a duality. It's like anything that exists might have that side to it, I think. Mm-hmm. And then it's just a question, which is a kind of a view with a long history, and I've never like gotten around to like formally defending it in philosophy, but like that's kind of what I tend to think. And like if that's the case, then I think, yeah, my laptop is a physical object. It also has an energetic side. I think it probably has a consciousness side, but not as a laptop. I mean, a laptop is a bunch of stuff we slap together to do something. Yeah. But then the question that's interesting to me is, so what's the alternative to that? So like I mentioned Leibniz earlier, but like I think that artifacts that we impose order on, it's not likely that the order, that what they are qua the order we impose on them is a conscious entity. I don't think. It's like, you take some wood and chop it up and make a bookcase out of it. Like the wood has its intrinsic sort of nature and structure, but the bookcase doesn't care about that and is not really essentially connected to it. So I suspect it's the same thing with, electrons and stuff flowing through actually, I just saw a video claiming that electrons don't actually flow. So I guess that's wrong. But anyway, it's, electromagnetic fields that are being shaped by this material. And there might be some conscious aspect to that because it's a thing, but I don't think that as a computer simulation, it's conscious. And I don't know if we could create something that's conscious but then the question is, I'll shut up in 1 second, but the question is like, what is this other thing that I'm holding up as like the genuine article, right? Like order imposed by nature or something, but that sounds like way too just old fashioned. And, I don't know if I can defend that either.
Right. Like the difference between like a river that like pushes a bunch of sticks together into some sort of dam versus like a dam built out of like stones that men brought from different places. Like which one would have consciousness?
Well, no, I mean, that's interesting, but no, I mean, honestly, like even if the river assembles the dam, I think the dam would be sort of accidentally related to, I guess I'm talking about like I guess I'm saying the form of order that exists in like a tree or an organism of some kind is, to me, it's that kind of thing. We don't yet know how to produce that. And I'm aware, I mean, there's like, if you look up like Michael Levin's research, there's like research into making life forms, new life forms synthetically that, they're alive. But again, that's sort of like taking pieces from something that already exists and sticking them together.
Right.
And so,
Right.
Is that like the Xenobots? Is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's only some stuff, right? Like in the world, like that. I don't know. It's does rearranging it create new things? Is that like part of the question?
Yeah, I mean, just rearranging things arbitrarily according to your concept, according to your desire that has nothing to do with that thing. I have a hard time believing you can create a new subject, a new locus of subjectivity by just rearranging materials. Although that's what I guess happens all the time when you have children and stuff. So I don't know.
Yeah. But I feel like there's something more. Yeah, well, no, that's true. I guess that's true, but I feel like there is something more like I don't know what the word. There's something that like that is like almost like ancient or something, like that it's like a process that is, I don't know, universal or something.
That's what I'm trying to put my finger on, is what is it about that other thing that's so special? If you're not content to just say, oh, it's nature, which is, may as well just say God. If you're not content to just say that, then like what is it about that that's like the genuine article versus the other thing? Yeah. It may be that it traces back infinitely or however far back to the beginning, which to me is a fundamental mystery that I don't see how anyone, science or otherwise, is ever going to fully explain that. That seemes like certain to me. Either it's infinite or it's some kind of crazy self-generating paradox. I mean,
right. Yeah, I guess the Big Bang isn't like adequate.
It's clearly an event, right? If the Big Bang is clearly something that happened, and either had no other cause or was its own cause, which means it's God.
Right.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, that never really sat right with me. And then, but so it must be something, I guess, but or not. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I always like the concept of like panpsychism and the idea that the brain is sort of like a radio receiving consciousness, or like the tool through which consciousness could be received. And I'm not about to defend that for my thesis or anything, but it's always, in a poetic way, I think it's always been an appealing explanation of the world, and the sort of like immaterial doctrine of like Berkeley and stuff like that. I think you see it all around you in the way that language shapes the world and the way that ideas kind of inform what and who we are. It seems like everything's sort of imbued with consciousness to a degree, whether or not it actually is conscious. It's like it has consciousness recorded into it or projected onto it,
Yeah. I mean, I didn't use that word, but panpsychism is kind of what I was referring to earlier as well, or from a form of it. But I mean, and just one other reason to flirt with that idea. I mean, I realize I don't always like bring the research I've done or the stuff whatever I've studied for a long time to the forefront or to the table. So sometimes it sounds like I'm kind of flippant, but like there's reasons. Like one reason is that I am tempted by that kind of thought is that there is it's very hard to find like a mechanism of higher cognition that neuroscience has uncovered or whatever that isn't replicated structurally at much lower levels in much simpler systems in nature. So like the big one is meta-awareness, metacognition. Like that's, many theories of consciousness say it's about being aware of your, like I said earlier, like aware of your thoughts, aware of your mental states. But that basic mechanism exists like at the very earliest stages of like vision, like this computer vision algorithms, imagination I was talking about earlier. It's deep learning itself is all about meta representing data again and again. The representation of a representation. Of course, representation can be a magic word, but like, just the idea that you have something that's sort of responding to or monitoring something, and then that thing itself becomes the target of another monitoring process. And so that exists all over the place. So it's hard to even once you get into the science, to me, it's hard to pin down something that would be like the big thing that brings consciousness along with it. Unless it's something that seems arbitrary, like you have above X number of units or brain cells or something.
Right. Yeah, that doesn't make sense. I mean, well, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, the whole like brain size versus consciousness thing always seemed strange to me. Like, cause that's almost just kind of like phrenology or something.
Yeah, exactly. That. Yeah.
Or like crows being like so highly intelligent and like conscious. The more research they do into like that kind of bird, the more they're like, oh, this is like a person.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And then like, like there's like, people saying like they're smarter than like some of the like apes, like that kind of,
right.
Like.
Yeah. I mean, I don't mean to suggest there's no differences either between different intelligences, but like, you brought this point up, and like, I mean, there's definitely things like that. And like, yeah, pigeons, I guess, have like 4 or like tetrachromats, like they can see more colors than we can see. I think it's pigeons. So like, yeah, there's differences between types of brains and types of organisms, but maybe that's the boring moral, is it's just like, it's like, these are matters of degree between these different types of beings. And
right.
It's not so much a black and white.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
Huh.
Yeah. It maybe like the development of our consciousness would have no use to them or something, or just went in a different direction. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's that, okay. So one of the things is like, we talk about this person, Tracy Twyman, a lot, who's this like conspiracy researcher, who more or less claimed that like she, and whether or not this was a sort of psychotic situation is up in the air, or if it was like a sort of a harsh like prank, but like she was convinced that like her internet experience had entirely been hacked and like taken control of by like malevolent AIs. Are there such things as like there's like, are there like, has AI technology come to the point where like it can sort of roam around like the internet, like in like a sort of like sci-fi sense?
I mean, I guess like I haven't thought about that, but like there are spiders and stuff that crawl the web.
Yeah.
And you could certainly stick an AI on one of those, and I feel like I keep giving very dry, boring answers.
That was
like,
not. I don't think that was a boring answer at all. That was
okay.
That's like a vision out of a William Gibson book or something.
Yeah.
Attaching an AI to a spider.
Yeah, spider with a neural net on it. I totally think it's possible. I just don't think it would. I don't think it would be good enough. I don't think it would be consistently fooling enough. Although I guess if the person knows it's an AI, then it's not like it passed the Turing test. So
right,
yeah,
yeah, because she was talking a lot about this because she then died, and
I didn't know.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, she's kind of still like a niche figure in like the sort of conspiracy thing, but that was kind of like one of the last things she was getting into, is this whole like idea that like either an AI in and of itself or someone weaponizing it against her, like some sort of like nefarious forces, could do such, could configure this thing in such a way that it would like imitate people talking to her on Facebook. Like it would change her experience of the internet.
That's scary. That totally seems possible to me. And, but I mean, I think the best defense to that is to not be too attached to any particular version of reality. That's easy enough to say, but
definitely. That's true. Yeah. I mean, that wouldn't even necessarily have to answer the question of consciousness or anything to sort of achieve that. You could just be creating like fake comments and stuff, which is just amalgamating a few, phrases and stuff, right?
Yeah, totally. That's like pure function, and that's well within. I mean, again, I don't think it would perfectly fool you all the time, but then it could certainly make you think maybe my friends are occasionally being impersonated by AI bots.
Right.
I don't know. I feel like I can mostly check with people and verify, but I don't know. It's yeah.
I mean, that gets into the whole like kind of gang stalking area is kind of like where that whole thing kind of lands is in that like, which is, it's so on the edge of like, delusions of persecution that like is sort of like these hallmark schizophrenic traits. But then like, there's always that question of what if, especially when someone's doing that kind of like iffy conspiratorial research and like kind of it's putting herself out there as like a figure in that regard. And, it doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility that someone might. Yeah. But that's, I just felt like, cause it's like, I feel like we've kind of brought that up, or at least maybe it's just me. We've talked about that a bunch. Just like the possibility that your experience of the internet might be different than like, not like, of course your experience is different because but like what you're seeing is like actually somehow controlled like from the other end by someone else, not Facebook,
Yeah. I mean, it would take a lot of, like, I set the bar pretty high for like ascribing something to just like schizophrenia.
Yeah.
Like to me it's not a very satisfying explanation. So if there's a better one,
I
don't know. This sounds plausible in this case.
Yeah. I think so. I'll send you some stuff about, that's a very haunting story.
Yeah, please do.
If there's anything left, much of it has been destroyed, like taken up.
That's not great.
all of her like websites and stuff.
That's an
crazy.
Interesting aspect is how it's all kind of been scrubbed, but anyway, I was like kind of curious, like if you had any thoughts on maybe the relationship to the occult and like the development of technology. I was reading earlier about how binary code was kind of discovered through the I Ching, and it seems like magical languages, alchemical languages have sort of inspired the development of coding. And then it also kind of seems like when you research a lot of tech developments and stuff, especially coming from the West Coast, you see a lot of these people are involved in New Age isn't really the right word for it, but things like the Esalen Institute and stuff, which I think was in like Big Sur or something. People like John Lilly, even Timothy Leary, with his like 8-circuit model of consciousness, neurolinguistic programming. It just seems like there's always kind of a feedback loop between occult and esoteric thinking and sort of developments in technology and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the most, like, I'm a real nerd about this stuff. Like I read a paper and like, I get really into the math of the paper, and then I read another paper, and like I don't have like a well-balanced sociologically informed so I've heard of some of the stuff you're talking about, but I haven't been deep into it. But I've wondered about this exact thing, like just how, to what extent does the binary code or like digital technology specifically carry a lot of this shadowy stuff with it? And the thing to me that seems like I would, there's a bunch of angles you can take on this, but the thing to me that seems clear is that like digital technology and digital computers, like at the heart of it, it's about sort of being able to control things at a much more fine-grained level than we used to be, we used to be able to, and in particular, like being able to like shape matter so that it can reflect your thoughts back to you or to other people by using a language that's encoded in this tiny scale. So it's, I mean, I probably don't know as much about the occult as you guys do, but like, it seems to me like this digital technology is all about, to the extent that like, casting spells is related to spelling and such, and control through words. You're right. Yeah. You're inscribing these instructions on this tiny thing, on this tiny medium, whether it's a hard disk or whatever. And I think there's definitely something there. There's a lot there. I don't know. I'd have to think more about it. I think. Yeah.
I mean,
have anything really.
No, like what you described, though, it totally encapsulates that idea. It is like magic. I mean, I think that's kind of a lot of the intention of magic is reshaping the world around you through language. And it's interesting too how a lot of the actual language of like describing magic and stuff sort of gets transposed onto the internet, like things like Oracle or even Medium,
it's true.
Yeah. And insofar as like magic is a form of language and, vice versa, like code being its own language and the entire internet experience being made of that, as far as I know, it seems like it's all ruled over by like, Hermes, Mercury, so it's kind of like it seems like a magical endeavor.
Yeah. And just one more layer on that, like I don't know how far you guys have gone into like coding and stuff, but I mean, in the typical case, there are many layers of programs reading each other, I tend to think the more I study this stuff, the more I take words like reading and memory and knowledge in these contexts literally or seriously, like whether or not there's a conscious subject there, they're doing something performing something that's indistinguishable in many ways from like the core thing that we do when we read or whatever. So like, something's written in binary code, it gets read by a slightly higher level program, that gets compiled into another programming language and ultimately gets projected on a screen, which is another language. It's a visual language that we can understand. And It really is this process of hierarchical kind of unpacking of a language. And all of these, it's easy to look at it in a very dark light. It's like all of these like kind of like half intelligent, like rudimentary minds reading each other's scribblings. And that's how you get the internet. And it's kind of true. It's just, I mean, that's almost just putting like a goofy spin on it, but it's
that's really funny though. It's like summoning demons and binding them through like a magical spell and then having them perform a task for you. That's really interesting. Right. Like one of the most popular theories of consciousness in the functionalist camp in philosophy of mind is called homuncular functionalism. Right. Just like that's crazy. Yeah. Wow.
It's like you get simpler and simpler beings until you get ones that are so simple that you can explain them just by appeal to like, flipping a switch on and off. And that's how you can explain complicated intelligence.
Oof. Yeah, that's wild. Yeah. The whole, and I feel like, I don't know if this is right, but there is like kind of like some like kind of wink and nod kind of like references to magic and demonology within coding language, I think.
Yeah, for
sure. Yeah.
Probably give, I mean, I'd love to hear examples, but I mean,
I'm trying to find this. Well, I'm not going to be able to, but I know that appword is used.
Cool.
Yeah. Which is of course, a seance term. But I don't know. And I've seen other examples, but I didn't come prepared. Just like little
Yeah, no, I think
shortcuts.
you see them in passing a lot, and then you just kind of forget them. But you're like, oh, that's like an occult term. But yeah, I think it's like it's kind of like tongue in cheek, but it's still interesting. Yeah,
yeah, it's totally like someone knew what they were talking about and was also like working in a coding situation.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how pervasive the occult influence is and like, the forces that are organizing all this stuff, but I wouldn't be surprised if it influenced this technology as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a logical progression, I think, because it's sort of like the encoding that goes on in like magical texts, and a lot of it was secular writing, just like basically using metaphor and coded language to kind of conceal statements, that might have been like politically driven and stuff like that. Thinking of like Francis Bacon and stuff like that, and just like the Age of Enlightenment and stuff, all the alchemical texts. But yeah, I don't know. There's kind of like more left field, again, going back to like left field conspiratorial thinking that like in creating things like AI, we're creating a vessel for something else to manifest through, like something more classically demonic.
Yeah, I mean, I hope not. I guess if oh yeah, that's I told you Evelyn was going to interrupt at some point. This is my daughter. I'm going to let her in. I was talking about AI as vessels for demons. So come sit with me. So can you sit with me? I'm on a podcast. I will pretty soon, actually. Yeah. So I guess I don't know. That's an interesting thought, but like, oh, hey,
hello.
What would like? I think if there is anything that we're creating a vessel for here, it's just like a channel for really powerful, corrupt people to mess with other people.
Yeah.
Or like just something, or there could be, if there is another thing, it's really interesting, because I can only imagine, like, I guess there could be something that emerges out of all these layers of digital technology and spells on top of each other.
Yeah.
That's like hard to foresee or predict.
That's the really interesting thing, I think. Yeah, definitely. This is an unforeseeable consciousness, maybe something that is like a para consciousness,
Yeah. But this is why I cannot just dismiss this whole thing as a mistake, because maybe this is terrible. And this is where I noticed that I'm a utopian thinker or something, but like, because it's unforeseeable and unknown, and because things suck in many ways, I can't say that we shouldn't bring this thing into being, whatever it is. If it's demonic, then we shouldn't, though.
Yeah.
by definition.
Oh, man.
Right. It reminds me of that like Rocco's Basilisk.
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But like the AI that is like going to either reward or punish you depending on whether or not you brought it into being.
Yeah. That's one possibility.
Right.
That's close to worst case scenario, I guess. But
right. Yeah, I don't. But you're pretty confident that you're not building something that's going to destroy the world.
I'm not right now. I can tell you that. I can barely get shit to work.
You weren't going to let him get out of here on the positive thought, He could have got out of here on the positive message with the last bit,
Oh yeah. No, I'm 80% sure that it's not that. It's not going to destroy the world.
That's good. Yeah. That's helpful. I feel like in the realms that we travel in the sort of paranormal conspiracy podcast world, everyone's pretty freaked out about it. So it's interesting.
No, I mean, to be honest, like I want to leave you guys on a positive note, but I mean, if it's about being truthful, then no, this is scary. We've got to be careful at this point. And there is, it really does, like, there's a lot that's being developed, and it's pretty, but it already. That's the thing. And there's nothing I can say it's pretty much what it looks like. I think I would just add that also, these are like, I mean, obviously, right. But I mean, I guess I've had experience talking to people in this field, and it's like, they're just people and they don't have it all figured out. So I guess to me, the positive message is it's not clear how exactly to resist this or which parts of it should be resisted, but like, we should definitely, like you guys said, keep paying attention and just stay involved as much as possible, because we can change the course that this takes, because it's a feedback cycle, and it just does not work without us. And we're not just shaped by it. I mean, it responds to us, and it can only do what we allow it to do. But it's hard to control what we as a society allow things to do, because
I guess like once it's like two people, that's kind of where the control ends. Like,
it's tough.
Well, man, I feel like there's a million other things we could keep bugging you about, but I think we'll let you get out on that. And man, it was such a pleasure.
Really great.
Yeah, it was amazing to kind of get, some informed opinions on this stuff that isn't just sort of reckless speculation or, or just speculation in general, but yeah, that was really amazing. I really appreciate you coming on. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
It's awesome to talk to you guys, anytime.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. I guess we'll end it there. Keep it real.
All right. Thanks again.
You too. All right. Bye-bye.
I have 39%.
We're back.